Hello and welcome to New Beginnings Farmstead. This is our A-team. I'm going to introduce everyone and then you can introduce yourselves. So this is, you're going to have to lean in. Egidio. This is Egidio. Can you see? Can you see everybody? Can you see 5 people?
We got 3.
I see 3. I know you're there.
All right. I'm Lisa. I'm the one who's been messaging back and forth with you. It's so nice to finally see you. This is Ryan. We have Julie and Jeff. If you want to lean in a little. You can almost
coming from the side.
Yeah. So welcome. Please introduce yourselves and tell us all about your farm. And I have to first tell you, I am so excited to be talking to a farm in Tennessee. We had no idea that there were maple syrup producers in Tennessee.
Most people in Tennessee don't either.
So please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Yes. Well, again, thanks for having us here. I'm Candace Wiggin, and this is my husband, Lucas Wiggin, and we're located in Northeast Tennessee. We're in Greene County, Tennessee. We're really close to, I guess that would be the Virginia border. Is that right?
Yeah, we're about 45 minutes from Virginia.
Yeah, so very northern Tennessee. And really, the way that I came into making maple syrup is I married into it. My husband's family, his parents are originally from Vermont.
Oh, how about that?
So that's how we ended up making maple syrup in Tennessee. And I always love to tell the story. When we first began dating, he would say, "We got to go bowl in the barn." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because again, I'm born and raised in Tennessee. And so all of our barns around here, they're tobacco barns. And that's what everyone did growing up. I was not in agriculture myself, but all of my friends and relatives, that's everyone in Tennessee farms. And it was typically tobacco growing up or cattle. We've got a lot of beef cattle where we are. And so he took me out to this property that I guess you and your dad and your brothers, they had bought at auction, which is where we live now. We've got a 100-acre farm. But at the time, they had just purchased it for hunting land. And when they got out here and started roaming the property, they found out that it had a lot of maple trees on it. Just bukus of maple trees growing throughout different parts of the property. So he would bring me out on the weekends and we would sit in a barn in camp chairs, and I didn't know what the apparatus was at the time. Turns out it was a barrel stove that they had basically put together. And all I can remember is we would sit there all night and it was freezing cold. And I said, "Now, why are you doing this and giving it away?" Yeah. So they were putting it in mason jars and then just giving it away to friends and neighbors, and word kind of got out that they can do this.
We weren't making that much to where it was a big deal. I mean, if we made 5 or 6 gallons a year or something like that at that point, that's all we were doing. We grew up. So I was born in Tennessee, and then my parents, they moved down, and then a year later after I was born, moved back up north. One of my grandparents on both sides got sick and ended up passing. So both my brothers were born up north, and then we moved back down 6 years later, and we've been down here ever since, and we've made it down here ever since. Mom and Dad I remember when we were kids, we'd get the old metal coffee cans or green bean cans and wash those out, and we'd get some elderberry and hollow out the elderberry, and that's what we used for spiles and for our cans. But we never made more than 5 or 6 gallons or anything like that. Nothing.
So when did you start selling it? When was it?
She got involved.
And I was like, "Listen," I said, "Well, I have to back up. I'm an educator, and his mom's actually retired from the local school system as well. And so for me, I said, you've got a perfect little niche here. You have a hobby that's unique to this area. No one knows about it." I said, I want to tell people about this, and I want to tell people how to do it. Of course, at the time, I was still learning how to do it myself. But I said, as an educator, this is something that I want to share. I want to share with my students. I want to share with my community. And so it just kind of spiraled from there. I guess the first step is I said, you need nicer bottles, because they were putting it in mason jars. So nicer bottles turned into nicer packaging, producing more, and it just kind of grew from there. I guess this is our third or fourth season open to the public.
Third selling.
Yeah, this would be our third season where we've actually invited the public out.
Produced enough to sell.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question for you. So, are you tapping sugar maples or red maple?
Sugar. Probably 98% of ours are sugar maples. We have a few red maples, a couple of silver maples on the property, but it's mostly sugar maples. Yeah.
And you're seeing.
I've also identified, now I'm not great at identifying them. I use an app for that. But I've identified a couple of black maples, rock maples.
Yeah,
Is that what it said?
Yeah.
Wow. And you have the temperature fluctuation that's enough, obviously, to have flow.
Yeah. So when we were kids, we tapped, and it's changed over the years since I've been down here. We used to tap when we were kids, beginning of February, and it'd last about 4 weeks in February. Of course, we were just using buckets and stuff like that. Now we're close to the beginning of January, and year before last, we probably could have tapped at the very end of December.
Wow.
We get enough flow at that point. So we're up to a little over 500 buckets, and I've got about 125 on tubing right now, and looking to go probably another 300 on tubing next year. So we're going to be, between the 800 and 1,000 probably within the next year or two anyways.
That's awesome. So your season is over.
It is wrapping up.
Well,
Today's a really good day, and it's our tubing is still running. All of our buckets have dried up. It's all the trees have healed over.
Well, and this is our first year going to the tubing system.
Yeah. So it was more of an experiment for us, I guess, at this point.
So, weeks ago, your dad said, okay, it's time to pool. And so they pulled the spiles and they pulled the buckets because we had a week of warm temperatures arrive like in the 60s, like 68 degrees. I mean, it felt like an early spring here in Tennessee. So we had a week straight of those temperatures. And then we went back to snow, and we actually missed 3 days of school last week because of snow and ice that came in. So what we found fascinating is once that snow and ice returned, and now that it's thawing out, the tubing system has started running again. And so we pretty much thought we were done because that's typically what we get.
Usually we only get 3 to 4 good weeks, and that's that. And typically we don't, it's not consistent throughout those 3 to 4 weeks. We'll have 2 to 3, maybe 4 good runs within that 4-week period of a couple of days or something like that. The weather, not very good weather for it down here, but we do pretty good with it.
Are there other producers in your area? It doesn't seem like there are.
Nobody else that sells. There's some people that do it in their backyard that, make a little bit for themselves or something like that, but nobody else that produces enough to sell or anything like that.
That was one of the things I'm trying to work on for this next year. So we joined the Kentucky Maple Syrup Producers Association because that was really the closest network of sugar producers that we could find. So we've joined them. We've went to 2 of their annual meetings, I believe, and then we've went up with Future Generations University in West Virginia, and we've done some work with them, and we toured. I can't think of the name of the festival, but they have like a Highlands Festival where they have weekends and they're celebrating maple syrup making in West Virginia and Virginia. So one of the things I've been wanting to do is try to find anyone in the state of Tennessee that's interested in producing maple syrup. So I started a Facebook group a couple of weeks ago, and I think we're up to 84 members. But again, I know I was shocked. I thought we were the only ones. We even got
somebody from Alabama.
Yes, we had someone from Northern Alabama join the group.
Yeah. They came to our open house. They actually came up to one of our open houses.
So these are people that you've got to remember. These are people that are making maybe 5 gallons for themselves.
No, not even that.
Maybe not even that.
We're talking most of them probably. If they make a gallon, they're lucky.
Right.
On that.
Wow.
So how many people, you have 500 buckets to empty? How many people empty these buckets?
There's about 3 of us.
We have a really big family.
Wow.
There's only about 3 or 4 that actually go out. We've got a pretty good sized family, but there's only 3 or 4 of us that actually go out and do the collecting.
So we should not be complaining then about having to go get our buckets. We have mostly tubing. Yeah.
That's part of the reason we haven't gone to tubing earlier is Dad really.
You're gonna tell on him?
Yeah, I am. He's kind of old school when it comes to the fact that he likes to see the buckets on the trees and stuff like that. And I like to see it. It's just I don't like to spend the 4 or 5 hours a day collecting.
Well, another thing you can do though, Lucas and his father, they work for themselves. They own a construction company, so they purposely slow work down during the month of January, especially. And so they'll plan around sugaring season basically so they can be here at the farm 24/7 because we're just doing this as a hobby. We all work full time, except for my mother-in-law that's retired. But they purposely slow work down so they can be here at the farm and at the sugar shack, and they can literally do this all day long, and they've got the manpower to do it. But Don is convinced that the tubing system is the way to go. Now that he's seen it in action, when we installed it, they wouldn't let us put it on their part of the property where it was visible because we also have there's a lot of grandkids. And so in the summers, we love to ride 4-wheelers. The guys are out hunting in the fall, and they were just really concerned about having the blue tubes everywhere. And they said, well, we're not going to be able to ride our 4-wheelers through the paths and through the woods. So we installed it on a section that they can't really see on the property. And so now after we've had it in place, at the last open house, it was really funny. My father-in-law always opens up the tour, and then typically I kind of take over and I start teaching about the tubing system. He jumped right in telling folks how great the tubing system's going to be, and then he started talking about plans for expanding it. So he is 100% on board now. He said, yep, that's the way to go. Because we've also got a really big ridge behind our house that is too steep for our 4-wheelers and our side-by-sides. And the guys started cleaning that out back in the fall, and they just didn't get very far as cutting trails in it. So it is the perfect opportunity for more tubing right there because we can't touch that section right now. It's too steep.
So where do you sell your product? And do you make anything besides, do you make any value-added products?
Go ahead. She likes to talk. I like her.
So one of our goals this year was to get a website up and running in an online store. So we did get a website up and running. I think it's Maple Grove Farm, maybe maplegrovefarmafton.com. I always mess that part up. But on the website right now, we only offer front porch pickup. So a lot of our local friends and our neighbors, they love to use that option because they'll drive out to the farm and they'll just grab it off the porch. Probably our first opportunity that opened up for selling it in store was a little boutique in town. It's called the Uncommon Collective, and it's just a little shopping area where different vendors, they have booths that they rent each month, and they sell just a variety of products. And so that has become our most popular place for our locals as well. If they don't want to come out to the farm, they pick it up there. Something that was new this year, we produce under the Tennessee Cottage Kitchen Act, and the Tennessee Cottage Kitchen Act has been updated to now allow for wholesaling. And so we've started doing some wholesaling also with farms that are surrounding Greene County. So for the people that are not right here in our hometown, we've been wholesaling to them, and so they can also get it. We actually have a place in Middle Tennessee. Is that Terra Bulk Foods? Mm-hmm. We have a bulk foods store that they contacted us, and so we ship to them every month. We ship a certain amount to them. So it's just really exciting. It's we're not big by any means, but I guess we're just a small producer.
We're big for
Tennessee, but compared to everywhere else, we're not big.
Well, how many gallons do you produce a year?
Well, this year I'm not sure yet. We had been producing around the 50 to 60 range, which still isn't a lot, but for the buckets it was it was quite a bit for the season that we get. So this year, we've still got some that we can boil down. So I'm not sure what we're going to get at, but I'm hoping to at least triple that this year. Next year, with the extra amount of tubing that we're going to have, I'm hoping to be, probably in the. I'd like to be around 300 gallons. Really, is where I'd like to be.
Wow, that's a lot.
This year, the sugar content was awesome this year. So normally we're 1.5% or lower, is where we're usually at.
Wow.
But this year we started right out at 2.5, 2.6%.
Wow, that's
Wow.
great.
We stayed fairly consistent throughout the whole part of our season. Actually, I tested some. I came in from work earlier, and the tubing was running really well. And we tested some of it, and it was still at 2%.
Wow. So do you use reverse osmosis at all?
Not yet. That's we got a TAEP. Right?
The Tennessee Agriculture Enhancement Project. We applied for the grant for the state of Tennessee, and it's a 50-50 cost share grant. And that was one of the things that I put in the grant, and I put an explanation of how that would affect us.
Yeah. We'll have to have it for next year with all the extra tubing. I won't be able to keep it.
So we got approved for the grant. So that's one of the things. The grant wasn't approved until late December. So we couldn't make any purchases until after we had received word that we were approved. But we've been approved for that. And so that's one of the next pieces of equipment we're going to be ordering.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations. That's nice.
Yeah,
So
that'll be a big help because it's a lot just to cook down all that, and because all we have is just a 2x6.
Do you use wood?
Yes, wood.
And do you get that from your property?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We got a lot here, so we just use that. But the RO will help out a lot.
So did you say, do you have value added products? Do you do other things, or do you have?
Yes, I stopped too short. I knew there was something else there I forgot to answer. One of my favorite products, we partnered with a distillery that is in a neighboring town. It's Tennessee Hills Distillery, and we get their used bourbon barrels off of them, and we make a bourbon barrel aged maple syrup, and that has been a huge hit in our area. We actually learned about it at the Kentucky Maple Syrup Producers Association. Nate Bissell, was that his name? Nate Bissell from Ohio. He came down and he was one of the keynote speakers, and he talked about how he started making bourbon barrel aged maple syrup, and he was very upfront and just forthcoming with information. Like, he was willing to explain, these are the steps that you need to do this. Of course, all the folks in Kentucky, they said, well, I just like to pour my bourbon into the syrup. And we said, you can't do that. That's not legal. Not in Tennessee. So Nate was fantastic. He basically gave Lucas his cell phone number, and he said, call me. He said, give it a try. Let me know what questions you have. And the biggest step, of course, was getting that relationship with the distillery. And so I was shocked that Tennessee Hills said yes. But basically, they call us when they've got a bourbon barrel. Lucas gets to drive up to the factory and help dump that. Then he brings that back, and we do a hot pack and seal and just let that marinate, let it sit in the barrel. And the smoky flavor and just the aroma that comes through it is amazing. So that's one
probably
of
our best seller. Yeah, we do a lot of other stuff. I mean, we do. I do the candies. We make cotton candy. Cotton candy. Pecan. We
I've
do.
been trying to getting me a
chili
candy
infused. Yeah,
I'm sorry. What did you say was that last part?
Go ahead.
I said we do a chili infused maple syrup where I take arbol chilies and I put it in the jars, and we hot pack the syrup in the jars with the chilies, and that's been really good for people that like barbecue and stuff like that. We do a maple cider. So it's our maple syrup, and then we get apple cider syrup, and we infuse those two together. That's been
apple cider syrup. I've never heard of that. Has anyone?
Yeah. So that's been really good. The apple cider syrup, I actually have to order that from Vermont.
Wow.
That's something that I guess they just make up there at one of the orchards up there. And it's really good. It's the same density, so we're not losing any density or anything like that with using that stuff. So, and that's been really good. We cook with all of our syrup. We don't do a lot of pancakes and waffles here. So that I keep a bottle of all of it right beside the stove. I actually used the bourbon stuff tonight on some kibasi and peppers and onions and stuff.
Oh, that sounds great. Wow.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you have
we do a chipotle rub too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we make a chipotle
With your
rub
maple
with a sugar.
Great.
So
Very nice.
we're all over the place.
More about your open house. When do you normally have that? Did you already have it this year?
We did. Typically for us, it's the middle part of January. So I think this weekend or this year, we tapped a week late this year. We didn't get tapped till January 12th because we had a huge ice storm come through and we were in a deep freeze for the entire first week of January. So I think we tapped on the 12th and our first open house was January 18th, which is a Saturday. And then we did another open house, whatever that next Saturday was, 25th after that. Traditionally, what we've seen with the open houses, no matter what dates we pick, that first Saturday is always bad weather. And it's typically raining or snowing. And so that was our experience last year. Last year was our second open house, and this was our third year. And I remember the first Saturday, it was raining. And I thought, nobody's going to come out here because we live in the middle of nowhere. Let's start there. It's the middle of nowhere. It's like this little one-lane road to get out here. And then it's just like a mud pit, you know, when you get out here and cars are getting stuck. And I couldn't believe it. People came out in their raincoats and their umbrellas and their boots, and they stood out there around the sugar shack. And I said, do you want to go into the woods and tap a tree? And everyone's like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's put our ponchos on and let's go tap a tree. And so they kept coming. I was shocked. And we had the same thing this year. I don't think it actually rained on us this year until the end of the day. We typically run all day. We'll go from like 10 to 4. And we've learned between the first and second years, it's a lot more organized if we do actual tours beginning at the top of the hour. And we can go through the entire presentation in about 45 to 50 minutes, but we start with the very beginning, taking them out into the woods. Dawn talks about identifying the maple trees. We do an actual tapping demonstration. So we leave certain trees untapped because we know we're going to be running tours on 2 different days. We tap the trees with them. If we're really lucky, the sap will instantly start running because they all want to taste the sap. We talk about gathering. We talk about the way we go around and collect on the buckets. Then I start teaching about the tubing system. And then after that, we take them back to the sugar shack where Lucas does a full tour of the evaporator. Because I guess what you've got to remember, here in Tennessee, nobody really knows where maple syrup comes from. I mean, we get the same questions over and over and over again. What does the sap look like? What does the sap taste like? Does it come out of the tree like maple syrup?
How much sugar we add?
How much sugar do you add to it? My favorite question is it sugar free? Do you offer a sugar free variety? No, we don't. So it is. It's very and I guess the teacher in me, that's where I see the need for the education. I mean, I teach 5th graders, and just the look on their face when I show them the little syrup packets from the cafeteria, and I said, you realize the first word in this is corn syrup. I said, there is nothing in here that's natural. This is not maple syrup. So I get to bring in the maple syrup and they get to taste it. And most of them have never tasted it. And a lot of kids, for our area, a lot of kids will say, I don't like that. It's too strong. It's too robust. Because that's basically all we can produce. We get anywhere from a dark amber to a really robust flavor. And so a lot of the kids said, I don't like that. That's too strong. My parents don't like that. Again, I'm born and raised here in Tennessee. My parents tell me that it's not thick enough and it's not sticky enough because they're used to the artificial maple syrup that comes in a plastic bottle. So we get those same questions with every tour. And something else that people they don't make that connection that when we talk about using an evaporator, we are literally evaporating water out of the sap in the form of steam. So it's a really good science lesson, even for adults, because they don't make that connection when they say, well, how do you cook it? And we say, well, you use an evaporator. So we go through all of the science with them. Lucas gets to do a lot of the density explanation about how do you know when it's done, because that's another question we get. Here in Tennessee, we've got a lot of people that, they do grow all of their vegetables in their gardens. And so every summer, everybody's harvesting green beans and tomatoes and corn. And a lot of people use pressure canning around here, pressure cookers. So we always get the questions, well, why don't you can it in a pressure cooker? And we're like, well, we can't do that because we don't want to heat the syrup above a certain temperature when we're trying to bottling it. So we have to talk about our hot pack and invert method on how we can sanitize our jars whenever we're filling them, because that's just something people around here, they're not familiar with. Most of them, even they say, well, why don't you give it a water bath after you can it? And we're like, you don't need to give it a water bath. The jar's been sterilized already. So we get to do a lot of the science explanations in that. And, how do we know that it is a shelf stable product? How do we check the density and know that this is something that is, not going to grow bacteria in the syrup itself? So it's just a lot of the same questions every time when we're doing these tours. And so by the time we go through all that information, it takes about 45 to 50 minutes.
Well, the way she talks, it's usually a little over an hour.
It is. But we went to that format in the last couple of years of doing tours, on the top of every hour. And this year we actually tried to do as best of a head count we could. We got one of those little clickers that you can use when you're clicking people like at a ball game. And I think we were right around 300 people on both Saturdays combined.
Mm-hmm.
But what was great is this year it was people that we didn't know. The first few years, you always have your family members, and then you have your coworkers and your friends and your church community, all of the people that we knew their faces. They came the first 2 years to support us. This year, it was absolute strangers. We had families drive up from Alabama. We had people come from miles and miles away, people that did not live in East Tennessee. And it really was people that we didn't know. Yep. And so I thought that was really impressive that we had 300 people come through that I didn't know a single face in the crowd.
Wow.
Even the fact that they just found us. I mean, yeah. I guess like you all, it just impresses me that you all found us on Facebook or found us online and here we are.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you agreed to log in and be a part of our podcast. I find your entire business to be very fascinating. Very, very excited to talk to you.
Road trip.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We might have to come by.
I'll be down in the fall.
Hey, if you want to install more tubing, that's on the to-do list. Lucas keeps inviting people. We visited some friends in Kentucky. Kentucky, we originally got the idea from the open houses from Kentucky. They have 2 specific weekends where all of your producers in Kentucky together, they agree on open house days, and they call it Kentucky Maple Days. So we drove to Kentucky, I guess last weekend, and we visited some friends and looked at their sugar shack, and then a flood came through Kentucky. And so we barely got out of Kentucky in time while it was raining because the farm that we were out, that was Southdown Farm, their area was actually flooded really, really bad. They were kind of in a holler, and he texted us afterwards and he said, I'm glad you all got on the road when you did, because we're basically flooded in where we are. And his church had a lot of damage to it, but we went and visited them. And that was one of the things I knew when I heard that Kentucky was doing organized tours. And I said, well, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this here in Tennessee on our farm. And we've had a lot of good compliments. Occasionally we'll have people come up who have grown up in the northern states from New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts. And they'll say, well, yeah, I've done this as a kid. And it's like they have that smell. And they said, I've not smelled this in years. Those are the people that they're always interested in our maple candies. A lot of people from this area, they don't like the maple candies. I don't like the maple candies because to me, it's just too sweet. But we find people that they've grown up around making maple syrup, or they've just seen it done as a kid. They love those candies. Yeah. But they also told us, they said, this was some of the best education we've received. They said, we've been to other sugar houses and we've looked at their evaporator and looked at their equipment, but we never really had somebody explain it step by step. It's just taken for granted that if you live in the northern states, you know how to make maple syrup and you know where it comes from. Like when I was making my lesson plans for my students here in Tennessee, I actually pulled some lessons from the state of New York, because in their curriculum for elementary school students is making maple syrup. It's something that they're taught about in the state standards. So I was able to pull all kinds of resources from our northern states to use with my kids, because again, it's not something that's taught just because it's not typically done down here.
So my husband had a question. I don't know why he's not asking, but do you use vacuum on your tubing?
Nope. No, 3/16 natural. So we've got enough slope around here where it'll create a natural vacuum in it. So where you guys are on probably 5/16 and vacuum, we do all 3/16 in the southern states.
Nice.
Everybody in Kentucky is on 3/16. So Just one of those things, I guess. I don't know.
And I can't tell you
I don't know
why.
enough about it to, I guess, tell you the reasoning why.
Well,
it's just,
and I do
it's
remember
easier.
the very first year that we visited the Kentucky annual CERT producers meeting. There is a guy with Future Generations University. It's Dr. Mike Ricklin. And he does a lot of research in producing maple syrup and producing tree syrups in general. And he presented a session, I remember that very first year. And I kind of tuned it out because I thought, well, we don't do tubing and we're never going to do tubing. So I tuned him out a little bit. But I remember he was presenting some research on the difference in using 3/16 and 5/16. And he was saying that 3/16 is more favorable for our southern climate producers. So he would definitely be someone to look back at that research, but he's been a great resource for us.
Nice.
Oh, look into that.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions?
Just if we go to buckets, I quit.
I don't blame you.
You heard them 5 hours a night. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine.
It's a lot of work. Well, and most of the time we have to collect usually in the mornings, the next morning, because by the time it gets warm enough down here, it usually runs into the night. So it's usually not. It's better for us to collect in the morning, first thing in the morning.
What is
a lot of times it won't get down way too cold to where it'll freeze it in the buckets or anything like that.
When you get a really cold spell, how cold is that for you? What is what do you have as really cold?
Yeah, I mean, our real cold spell this year was probably 7 or 8 degrees or something like that.
I'm thinking 8. I know last week when we were out of school, we had a night where it got down to 8 degrees. And that morning, one of the reasons that they did cancel school is because that morning our temperatures were hovering right around 10 degrees. And so there really wasn't a lot of ice on the road. It's just that the temperatures were so cold. That's always a concern in this area with the temperatures being cold. We don't handle snow very well in Tennessee, so it only takes a dusting to get us out of school. But I can't remember anything lower than 8 this year.
No, nothing this year.
Oh, that's still pretty cold. Yeah, I just
we don't. I mean, we don't have a real deep frost depth or anything like that around here. If we're getting 4 or 5 inches into the ground, that's about it for our frost depth. So not like up north there, you guys are probably got a 3-foot frost depth or something like that. We ain't got nothing like that. Yeah.
Nice.
We don't get that cold. Or if we do, it's not for very long.
And when we get snow, I mean, it's here for maybe a day, and that's it.
Yeah.
We had a beautiful snow last Thursday morning, and I woke up and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be great. We're going to be sledding all weekend." No, it was gone by 3 p.m.
And when she says it's a beautiful snow, we're talking like 2.5 inches. Okay, so
that's what we get.
There's not a lot.
Very pretty. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Oh
No.
We hope to come see you someday.
Yeah, we hope to pass them through, and because we do take some road trips and we have some plans, so you never know. Maybe I'll reach out and we'll come to your farm.
Remember, we start early, January.
Well, thank you again so much, and good luck with all your plans for next year, and we hope to talk to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.